Hello everyone and welcome to my book talk. This is a conflict comparison with your resident comparative literature major. I want to be talking about two novels today, Zan by Suzi Ehtesham-Zadeh and Woman at Point Zero by Nawal el Sadaweh. So both of these novels highlight Middle Eastern women and touch on the role that women play in society. They do it in a couple of different ways, but thematically they are practically siblings. While Zan takes place in Iran and generally pertains to Iranian women, Woman at Point Zero takes place in Egypt and is about Egyptian women. They both utilize multiple points of view throughout their narratives to give it more of a sense of authority, just again in two completely separate ways. I think it's really interesting the way that both of these novels can have similar effects, but going about it to completely separate manners. So to start with Woman at Point Zero, I start with that because chronologically it was the novel I read first. I read that novel in high school, my senior year, and it was probably one of my favorite reads. It was nice and short, and for a senior in high school, that was exactly what my attention span needed. It's about 144 pages, so I sat myself down on the couch one day and read it all in one sitting. Something that's really cool about Woman at Point Zero is the fact that it's a framed narrative. So the book itself is only 3 chapters long. Chapter 1 is, so let me preface, it's framed by chapters 1 and chapter 3 being from the perspective of a psychiatrist who is interviewing the main character. And chapter 2 is the main character sharing their life story. So the main character is this woman named Firdaus. She is, at the beginning of the narrative present of the novel, she is in prison and is being interviewed by this female psychiatrist, and Firdaus is known for not talking to anyone. And this female psychiatrist is the first person who has been able to get through to her, that she's been willing to talk to and share her story. So chapter 2 is Firdaus explaining her life story, how she ended up in prison, she's on death row, so how she ended up there and why she's made the decisions that she's made, so her entire life story. And then chapter 3 is again the perspective of the psychiatrist. I really enjoyed Woman at Point Zero. I have so much praise for the novel. I thought it was incredibly thought-provoking and very deep, and one of the things that I loved about it the most was the way that chapter 2 just pulls you in. It doesn't feel like it's too much dense information in one section. It feels like you're going along for this ride with the main character, which I thought was really beautifully done. One of the things that I found the most interesting in the novel was the sense of liberation that one can find in different roles in society. So Firdaus was forced to marry young, and then, sorry, I should say spoiler alerts. Firdaus was forced to marry young and had an abusive, much older husband, and she finally runs away, and she eventually becomes a prostitute. And it's interesting to see the amount of freedom that she has as a prostitute that she did not have as a wife. So even when she held a high place in society, she had a rich husband, she was well off, she was respectable, she was all of the things that society wanted her to be. She did not have any freedom. She was completely at the subject of her husband. But when she left and she became a prostitute, she was her own keeper. She got to decide what clients she had, when she had them, for how long she had them, how much it would cost. She got to make all of the decisions for herself. The amount of bodily autonomy and agency that she had once she had stepped outside the roles society was asking of her were huge. And what's funny when you take a look at these transactional relationships is she was being paid, she was giving freedom by the people who had been taking freedom away from her. So she was, right, all of her clients, she had male clientele, they were paying her, they were the people that were revering her and coming to see her time after time after time, when her being what they were running from, the society that they were enforcing, is what was giving her money, which I thought was super interesting. Now on to Zan. Zan is really, I think, provocative because the author uses second person, which I rarely see, and I feel like it's done so flawlessly. It didn't feel forced, in my humble opinion, of course. And I loved the multiple narratives used. So in Woman at Point Zero, because it's a doctor speaking, we get a sense of authority, like, right, ethos, pathos, logos. We're getting someone who's like of a specific standing, of a specific expertise speaking, gives it more authority than us just questioning, like, oh, is this woman a reliable narrator? Is this what actually happened? Or is she lying to us? Whereas Zahn gives a different sense of authority in the way that it's multiple people essentially making the same point. They're sharing similar experiences that are getting across the same point. Another thing that I really enjoyed about Zahn was the fact that it highlights multicultural voices. So I myself am a multicultural child. The author is a multicultural child. So having the voices in the novel be multicultural ones and sharing multicultural stories and experiences, I think really highlights the global effect that societal and cultural views can have, because when one person leaves their country, they don't necessarily leave their views behind with them. Quite often they'll carry on with them, and that's how we get, smaller communities. I know we have tons of those here in San Diego. So I really appreciate the way that real life aspect is brought into it. Like, one of the stories is about this woman who was born in Iran but then moved to the US and is now going back to Iran to visit with her husband. And that sense of familiarity and home, but also feeling completely out of place, is something that I really connected with, because that's something I feel all of the time. And she highlights not just multicultural voices, she also highlights queer voices and queer experiences, which I think is a perspective. I mean, being queer in its own right is enough of a struggle in society. You get othered, there's constantly struggles that you're fighting against, but being an immigrant as well on top of that, that's two life experiences that are hard enough, and having to deal with yourself and your beliefs and the things that you identify with going completely against your family's cultural views, and knowing that they won't accept you, is devastating. And I feel that that's beautifully portrayed in the novel. I have, again, nothing but praise for both of these novels. I think they are fantastic. They're both relatively short reads. Like I said earlier, Woman at Point Zero was about 144 pages, whereas Zahn is a little over 200. So they're both pretty quick reads. Woman at Point Zero, like I said, I finished in a day. Whereas Zahn, so each chapter in Zahn is a different story. It's a collection of stories in one novel. So if you have to put the book down for some reason, you have some other things you gotta go do, you can pick up right where you left off and you won't feel like you're missing any part of the story, because it's a completely different story. So as long as you finish the chapter, you're fine. But that is all I have to say about these two lovely novels. I hope you will give them a read, and I would love to know what you think.